Hey, it's time for another game jam, and this time I'm actually going to submit a game, is what I said last time, but that was a lie. So this is round 2 of Brackeys game jam, where I have 7 days to make a game. This time the theme is Calm Before the Storm, which was kind of fitting at the time this was announced. So let's get started with day 1, where I made a plan, which was of course made with Microsoft Paint, and to fit in with the theme I'm going to be alternating between a calm and a storm phase. To sum it up, we have sea, you have restaurant, you are boat with cannon, pirate attack, cannon fire, pirate sink, stonks. Now as for the game engine of choice, since this is round 2 of Brackeys game jam, it's round 2 of Godot, because game jams are clearly the perfect time to learn a new game engine, as I found out last time. So I didn't know how to center the text, so I gave up and went back to Unity, but this time will be different, hopefully. Step 1, download Godot. Step 2, watch a Brackeys tutorial, because I don't know what to do next. Brackeys game jam, Brackeys tutorial. This video was brought to you by Brackeys, quite literally, since I'm new to Godot, if we ignore the failed attempt from last time. I created my first scene, and then checked it was working. Next I started working on some art, since it wasn't exactly a strong point in my last game jam attempt. This was also my first time using tile maps, so the sheet goes through many changes, and I'm glad that Godot doesn't make me remap all the tiles each time. I got it working, so now it displays on the screen. 2 problems though. It doesn't scale with screen size, and the second issue is actually 401 errors, not to be confused with a 401 error code. Fortunately, one button fixes 401 problems, so I prefer that to a 401 error. And the scaling is configured in the project settings, so we can go on to the next step, and that's creating a character, which is made of a collision and a sprite node. Oh, there's an animated sprite node. Yes please, except I don't know how to animate, so in the end I just used a static sprite. Next is time for folder management, where I've got to remember, unlike Unity, game objects are counted as scenes in Godot. After that, I created my first script after deciding to use GDScript instead of C#, since if I'm using a new game engine, I might as well try the whole experience. I got a basic movement script working, so the game is no longer a still image. Next is flipping the sail direction to reflect the player inputs, although there was a tiny detail bothering me when the boat moves left. Can you see it? One of these states is out of place by a couple pixels. That was pretty quick to fix, so then I started playing around with delta for the movement, since movement shouldn't depend on frame rate, and this made an unexpected but cool slide. Turns out I was actually using delta twice, as delta is already applied to the movement function I was using, and if you're curious what applying triple delta looks like, here you go. Almost as slow as my upload schedule, considering I'm editing this a month later. Anyways, I added some barriers to prevent the player from going outside of the camera boundaries, and they were clearly doing their job. Since the barriers were invisible, I found the perfect use for the default Godot sprite you're given at the start of the project, and with this debugging I found that the barrier positions were offset. I wish I could say half a pixel, but this is half a screen. After fixing that, I added some animations to the sea, and next on the list is adding a scary pirate as an enemy, although I think they were more scared of me. So I gave them a buff, and to end the day, I made it so they can collide with the player, and apparently only the player. I've accomplished more in one day than the first 3 days combined in the last jam, but unfortunately today is more productive than the next 5, starting with day 2. The next step is adding a game over screen when the pirate reaches the restaurant, with the slow-mo being made with some casual time manipulation. Meanwhile, I made a basic death animation for when a pirate crashes into the player, although the intended way to sink pirates is to fire cannonballs at them. And here's me struggling to make a circle sprite. I'm getting flashbacks to the triangle incident. But when life doesn't give you lemons, you just buy your own and hope the lemonade doesn't break physics. Eventually the cannonballs were working, so I expanded the scene and started work on the enemy spawner, which had many issues, but that's for day 3 me to solve. When working on the spawner, it makes sense to work on the wave counter. And no, there isn't over 1000 levels, I just accidentally put it in a loop that updates every millisecond. Anyways, I added a storm countdown, which will be part of the calm period. The labels fading was made by creating a tween node, which is a lot more convenient than playing an animation. Something that isn't so convenient is deciding to make one little change where I increase the spawn rate, and that breaks the spawner, and makes Diglett evolve into Dugtrio. But I'm going to sleep, so I'll just pretend this never happened. Day 4, I apparently did nothing. So next is day 5, can't run away from your problems forever. To accommodate the faster spawn rate, I made it so boats can't spawn in the same place twice in a row, which should have been quite simple, but you know things aren't going well when you've got 3 debugging logs to test one line of code. Then you add one word and everything magically works. Anyways, we now switch over to the calm phase, since it's kind of non-existent. This will be where you can take a break and purchase upgrades. The camera transition is something that I'm happy with since I got to use tweens again. As for the upgrades, I made buttons for cannon damage and cannon reload, which definitely needs to be capped. The reload button was actually broken and upgraded damage, and that's why you don't copy and paste like I did. Finally, I added a cap to both stats to end the day. And don't worry, I did notice the empty space at the top, which I fixed in day 6, where you'll also see a few new visuals. The upgrade buttons stand out a bit more after learning about UI themes in Godot. I also increased the calm period timer since 3 seconds feels more rushed than the actual storm phase. Now there's plenty of time. I'm sure the people playing for the first time will also agree. There's even a skip to storm button. I'm so thoughtful. I also have to mention the graphic for the storm countdown, as I'm quite proud of that. Next I added a currency to the game, which you gain after each wave and you can spend in the shop. Now we move on to day 7, the final day. I got out of bed with only 19 hours to go and a lot of things to work on, but breakfast comes first. 1 hour later, I started adding more upgrades, also known as more text to read and decide in less than 10 seconds. This time these upgrades are related to the restaurant, which I think everyone including myself has forgotten about. I also adjusted the upgrade costs, although that did break the shop again. After fixing those issues, it was time to make the storm more like a storm. First I made the scene appear like it was night, and I have to say, I love how simple this is. I also learned what a tween was outside of the context of Godot, and let's just say I now know I need to be careful with my phrasing. Further adding to the transition is my greatest artwork yet, mainly because it was one of the few things that I actually used a reference for, other than a pirate hat, since for some reason the only one that would come to mind was this one. Another fun fact about this transition was that it was inspired by a random visual effect in Plants vs Zombies 2, where I played 3 ads and half a level to get this footage. Next up is adding new enemies. I used my creative imagination, and now we have Pirate and Big Pirate. Although Godot seems to have something against copy and pasting Pirate to make a strong pirate, as it for some reason replaces the original sprite with a copy of the new one, and when you press undo, it deletes the original, and just to spite you even further, it crashes completely. Nice. So time to do that all again with a civilian boat and a submarine. Apart from the player, all of the entities were animated with the classic Ctrl-C, Ctrl-V, a few pixels here and there, so I've gotten used to the animated sprite nodes. Also, how does one draw a submarine from a top-down perspective? Since they were enemies, I added a pirate icon, but now they just look like bananas with expiry stickers on them. Anyways, we're finally at the home stretch, where I played around with particles for a rainy storm, as well as a trail for the submarine, since they start underwater. There's also updated game over messages if the pirates invade, or if you hit a civilian, since they'd probably see you. Well, not that they'd survive anyways. To be fair, they are pretty annoying, since you have to let them pass without crashing into them, and if you have really bad RNG, it could mean a wave becomes unexpectedly difficult, but you got to get that victory somehow. So at this point it's 3 in the morning, and I should really start thinking about submitting the game, but then I remembered audio plays a part in the Game Jam rankings, and my game is currently on track to place in last in that category. So I downloaded an ancient application called Bosca Sol Coil, one of them, and clicked around randomly to create a retro style track, which is the only style that would probably sound okay if I made it. Plus it works well with my pixel art, so I guess that works out. I spent more time trying to download the app than making the track, and I'm already tired of this tune, so I added a mute button, and now you don't have to suffer from it either. I only spent a couple minutes on this since I wanted to go back to submitting. I had to tidy up some things like the spawner so enemies gradually get harder. I also once again remembered that this restaurant existed, where for some reason the windows are on the floor, so I fixed that and added some visual upgrades so the building actually appears upgraded. And this is what the end game looks like with max upgrades. It may be overpowered, but you still have to be careful if you don't want to risk restarting 10 waves like I did. Anyways, I'm finally submitting and got stuck at the first step, which is how do I export this game? After finding a tutorial, I'm glad to have exported my first ever HTML game. Next I created an itch.io account. Imagine if you had to sign up before the jam starts in order to qualify. That would be awkward. But luckily you don't have to, so I finally submitted a game to Brackeys Game Jam after taking a lazy screenshot for the thumbnail, as I'm not creating a new graphic at this time of night. I just want to sleep. But unfortunately that would still have to wait anyways, because I found that the particles in my game wasn't working in the web version, so the storm and submarine looked very plain. I spent half an hour trying to figure out the cause, messed around with a few settings, and submitted a new version to see if that worked, which it didn't, so that was annoying. I did find it was possibly working on some devices and not others, but I give up for now. can't say I enjoyed encountering that at almost 5 in the morning, but at least I received a nice comment before the voting phase even started. Thanks dude. I can go to sleep happy now. Technically, I still had another 6 hours spare, but I have a train to catch in 8 hours, and I haven't even started packing for my week-long trip. Anyways, here's a random bowl of ramen, and now we fast forward to where the voting phase has ended. Thank you to the people who rated my game. Half of these ratings were also from the last day, so it's honestly impressive how supportive the community is. And now you may be wondering, with over 1,500 submissions, where did I rank? With the results released, I'm happy to announce that I placed in the top 50%. More specifically, 559th. Some people got disqualified, so I might go up a few spots. Although it's nowhere near close to winning, I met my goal of reaching top 1,500, also known as submitting something on time. As for the rating distribution, I've basically made a game that's the definition of mid, averaging around 3 out of 5 for most categories. And if you want to play this mid game, the link will be in the description where you can play in the browser. I may turn this into a full game at some point, but that's been everything for this 7-day game jam. So thank you all for watching.